The secret monster, the birth of the Shinano. Ever heard of the Yamato-class battleships? Giants of the sea, the pinnacle of naval engineering in their time. But what if I told you the third ship in this legendary trio never sailed as a battleship? Instead, she was transformed into something even more secretive, a colossal aircraft carrier named Shinano. This is the story of her incredible and ultimately tragic birth. The tale begins in the shadow of her famous sister, the Yamato. While Yamato and Musashi were already flexing their muscles as the world's most powerful battleships, the hull of the third ship lay incomplete at the Yokosuka Naval Arsenal. Then came the Battle of Midway in 1942. It was a devastating blow to the Imperial Japanese Navy, which lost 4 of its best aircraft carriers in a single battle. Suddenly, the strategic landscape shifted. Big guns were out, naval air power was in. The Navy realized they needed carriers, and they needed them fast. The unfinished third Yamato-class hull presented a unique opportunity. Why build a new carrier from scratch when a massive, partially built fortress was already waiting? The decision was made. This battleship would be reborn as an aircraft carrier. The project was given the highest level of secrecy. The name Shinano was chosen after a province in Japan, continuing the tradition of naming battleships after ancient provinces. But her true purpose was hidden from the world. The conversion was a monumental task. The engineers had to design and build a flight deck and hangar on top of a hull designed for massive gun turrets. The result was a ship of unprecedented size. When completed, the Shinano was the largest and heaviest aircraft carrier built in the world during World War II, a title she would hold until the American supercarriers of the 1950s. She displaced nearly 72,000 tons fully loaded. Her flight deck was heavily armored, designed to withstand 1,000-pound bombs, a lesson learned from the fiery fates of the carriers lost at Midway. The ship was conceived not as an offensive strike carrier, but as a massive floating support base. Her primary role was to stay behind the front lines, servicing, rearming, and refueling aircraft from other carriers, acting as a giant mobile workshop and arsenal. Her own air group was relatively small for her size, meant mainly for self-defense. She was in essence a floating fortress designed to sustain Japan's naval air power. But building such a behemoth in total secrecy was a Herculean challenge. The Yokosuka Naval Arsenal was transformed into a fortress within a fortress. A massive fence of wood and matting was erected around the dry dock, obscuring the view from both land and sea. All workers on the project were sworn to secrecy under threat of severe punishment. Photographs were strictly forbidden. The Allies knew Japan was building a third Yamato-class ship, but their intelligence on its conversion was hazy at best. Allied reconnaissance photos showed a large hull under construction, but the massive screen around it made it impossible to determine its exact nature. Rumors circulated, but concrete evidence of a new supercarrier remained elusive. Japan was successfully hiding its secret monster from the world's prying eyes. However, as the war turned against Japan, the pressure to complete the Shinano intensified. The project became a frantic race against time. By 1944, American B-29 bombers were beginning to raid the Japanese mainland, and the Yokosuka area was a prime target. The Navy feared their secret weapon would be destroyed in its dock before it ever set sail. Corners were cut. Quality control suffered. Many of the ship's systems were left incomplete. For instance, only a handful of her watertight doors were actually functional. Much of the internal compartment testing was skipped. The fire suppression systems were not fully installed, and the crew lacked proper training on the systems that were in place. The ship was a giant, but a flawed one. Her immense strength on paper was undermined by the rushed and incomplete nature of her construction. She was a ticking time bomb, riddled with vulnerabilities that would soon prove fatal. By November 1944, the situation was desperate. The Naval Command decided Shinano had to be moved from the exposed Yokosuka shipyard to the relative safety of the Kure Naval Base for her final fitting out and trials. The planned date for this transfer was pushed forward due to intelligence suggesting an imminent large-scale B-29 raid on Tokyo. So on the evening of November 28, 1944, under the cover of darkness, the Shinano embarked on her maiden and only voyage. She wasn't fully ready for sea. Many of her watertight doors were still not installed, and the crew, a mix of seasoned sailors and inexperienced recruits, had barely had time to familiarize themselves with the massive vessel. They were essentially learning on the job on a ship that was still a construction site in many ways. Accompanied by 3 destroyers, the world's largest aircraft carrier slipped out of Tokyo Bay, a secret giant escaping into the night. They hoped the darkness and their speed would shield them from enemy eyes. But lurking in those same dark waters was an American submarine, the USS Archerfish, on patrol. The fate of the secret monster was about to be sealed in a dramatic and swift conclusion to her short life. The maiden voyage, intended to bring her to safety, was instead leading her directly into a deadly trap. But that's a story for another time. The saga of Shinano's birth is a fascinating glimpse into the desperate measures of a nation at war. It's a story of incredible ambition, remarkable secrecy, and ultimately, fatal haste. A battleship reborn as a carrier, a secret hidden in plain sight, and a giant rush to sea before her time. The Hunter, USS Archerfish, and Captain Joseph Enright. Have you ever heard of a submarine so tough, so advanced for its time, that it became the backbone of an entire navy? Let's talk about the Gato-class submarine. During the Second World War, the United States rolled out these underwater predators, and they were a game changer. Think of them as the workhorses of the deep, a perfect blend of range, firepower, and survivability. With 10 torpedo tubes and the ability to dive deeper than their predecessors, these subs could sneak into enemy territory, deliver a devastating blow, and slip away unseen. Over 100 of these steel sharks were built, and they sent countless enemy ships to the bottom of the ocean. They weren't just weapons of war. They were marvels of engineering that defined submarine warfare in the Pacific. One of these submarines, the USS Archerfish, was about to sail into history, helmeted by a man with everything to prove. His name was Joseph Enright, a man haunted by a ghost. Not a real one, but the ghost of a missed opportunity. Earlier in his career, as the captain of another submarine, the USS Dace, Enright had a Japanese aircraft carrier in his sights. It was the chance of a lifetime, the kind of target every sub-commander dreamed of. But something went wrong. A miscalculation, a moment of hesitation, and the target slipped through his grasp. The weight of that failure was immense. He was relieved of his command, a devastating blow for any naval officer. It seemed like his career was over. But the war had a way of giving second chances, especially to men with skill and determination. Enright was eventually given command of a brand new Bailey-class submarine, the USS Archerfish. This wasn't just another assignment. It was his shot at redemption. He was determined to not let it go to waste, carrying the lessons of his past failure with him into the dark waters of the Pacific. So what was the Archerfish even doing so close to the Japanese mainland in late November 1944? It's a bit surprising, but its primary mission wasn't hunting enemy ships. It was on lifeguard duty. That's right, a lifeguard. As American B-29 bombers began their massive raids on Tokyo, they had to fly over vast stretches of hostile ocean. If a plane was damaged or ran out of fuel, the crew would have to ditch in the cold, unforgiving waters right off the coast of Japan. The Navy stationed submarines like the Archerfish along the flight paths of these bombers. Their job was to stay on the surface, ready to dash in and rescue any downed airmen before they were captured or succumbed to the elements. It was a crucial but often tedious role, requiring immense patience. For days, Enright and his crew patrolled their designated area, their eyes glued to the sky, waiting for a call that might never come, all while deep in the enemy's backyard. Little did they know, fate had a very different kind of encounter in store for them. It was the evening of November 28, 1944. The night was dark, the seas were rough, and the crew of the Archerfish was settling in for another long, uneventful watch. Suddenly, the radar operator, the electronic eyes of the submarine, shouted out. He had a contact, a big one. At first, they thought it was just a small island, a blip on the screen that shouldn't be there. But then, the unthinkable happened. The island started to move. Joseph Enright rushed to the conning tower. He looked at the radar screen himself. It was no mistake. A massive target was moving across the water, and it was heading away from them. In the pitch-black chaos of a stormy night, a mystery was unfolding. What could be so large that it was mistaken for an island? An enemy task force? A lone, giant ship? The crew's boredom instantly evaporated, replaced by a surge of adrenaline. This was it. The hunt was on. Enright ordered the Archerfish to change course, to pursue this phantom contact into the darkness, not knowing they were about to chase down the biggest prize of the entire war. The moment the radar confirmed the target was a ship, and a colossal one at that, Joseph Enright knew this was his second chance. But there was a huge problem. The target was moving fast, and it was already at the edge of their radar's range. If they tried to chase it underwater, they'd never catch up. Submarines of that era were slow and sluggish when submerged. Enright had to make a bold and incredibly risky decision. He ordered the Archerfish to stay on the surface. This turned the submarine into a surface ship, using its powerful diesel engines to race through the choppy waves. Surfacing in enemy waters so close to Japan was practically suicide. They would be a sitting duck for any enemy plane or patrol boat. But Enright was betting everything on the stormy weather and the darkness of the night to hide them. For 6 long hours, the Archerfish pounded through the heavy seas, its engines roaring at full power. The entire crew was on edge. Every splash, every creak of the hull was a reminder of the danger they were in. They were chasing a ghost in the storm, a race against time and the odds, all for a shot at a target they couldn't even see yet. After an agonizing 6-hour chase on the surface, pushing the Archerfish to its absolute limit, the moment of truth arrived. Peering through the binoculars, Enright and his lookouts finally got a visual. Silhouetted against the dark horizon was a vessel of unbelievable size. It wasn't just a ship, it was a monster. They had stumbled upon the largest aircraft carrier ever built at the time, the Shinano. This behemoth was so new, so secret, that American intelligence barely knew it existed. It was on its maiden voyage, being moved from its shipyard to a safer port to be fully equipped. It was protected by a screen of 3 destroyers, but its commanders felt secure, believing no American sub could be in these waters. They were wrong. For Enright, this was a moment straight out of a dream. The ghost of his past failure was staring him right in the face, and it was bigger than he could have ever imagined. He now had the ultimate prize in his periscope. The question was, could he sink it? With the Shinano in his sights, Enright knew he had only one shot. He couldn't risk a prolonged battle with the escorting destroyers. He had to be precise, and he had to be perfect. He remembered his previous failure, the missed opportunity with the other carrier. This time, he wouldn't let hesitation be his downfall. He maneuvered the Archerfish into an ideal firing position, a textbook maneuver that put him at a 90-degree angle to the Shinano's path. This would give his torpedoes the best chance of hitting their mark. He ordered a spread of 6 torpedoes to be fired, but he did something unconventional. He set them to run shallow. Most captains would aim deep, trying to break the ship's keel. Enright, however, gambled that a shallower hit would cause more widespread flooding on a ship that was still incomplete, and likely had watertight doors that were unfully sealed or crews that were unfully trained. It was a brilliant, calculated risk, based on pure instinct and experience. The command was given, "Fire 1, fire 2. One by one, the 6 steel fish leaped from their tubes and raced towards the giant. The crew of the Archerfish held their breath. Minutes felt like hours as they waited, listening on the hydrophones for the sound that would seal their fate. Then it came. Boom! A deep, thunderous explosion echoed through the water. Then another, and another, and another. 4 of the 6 torpedoes had found their mark. On the Shinano, chaos erupted. The massive carrier shuddered violently. Enright's gamble had paid off spectacularly. The shallow-running torpedoes ripped into the ship's hull just below the waterline. Because the ship was so new, its damage control crews were inexperienced, and many of its watertight compartments weren't properly sealed. Water began pouring in, far faster than anyone could have imagined. The mighty Shinano, the pride of the Japanese Navy, began to list, its journey over before it had even truly begun. The giant was mortally wounded. For Enright and the crew of the Archerfish, the sound of those explosions was the sound of redemption. Despite taking 4 torpedo hits, the Shinano was so enormous that its crew believed it was unsinkable. They were confident they could contain the damage and make it to port. But the flooding was relentless. The ship's list grew more and more severe. The escorting destroyers, initially hunting for the Archerfish, were now forced to turn back to assist the crippled giant. This gave Enright the chance to slip away. He ordered the Archerfish to dive deep and rig for silent running. They listened as the sounds of the dying carrier and the frantic destroyers faded into the distance. Hours later, the Shinano, the largest warship to be sunk by a submarine in history, finally succumbed. It capsized and disappeared beneath the waves, taking over 1,000 of its crew with it. Back on the Archerfish, they didn't know the final fate of their target yet. They only knew they had hit it and escaped. When Enright filed his report, he claimed to have sunk a large carrier. The Navy, skeptical that such a huge ship could even exist, initially credited him with sinking a smaller cruiser. It wasn't until after the war, when records were examined, that the truth came out. Joseph Enright, the captain who was once relieved of his command for failure, had single-handedly sunk the biggest aircraft carrier in the world. His redemption was complete, a legendary tale of a second chance taken and a ghost finally laid to rest. The cat-and-mouse game, a night of high tension. The night was November 28, 1944. The USS Archerfish, a WW2 submarine commanded by Joseph F. Enright, was on a routine patrol in the Pacific. Suddenly, a massive blip appeared on the radar. It was bigger than anything they had ever seen. Enright initially thought it was a tanker, but as they got closer, the silhouette revealed something far more significant. It was the Shinano, a brand new, top-secret Japanese aircraft carrier on its maiden voyage. This ship was a monster, displacing over 70,000 tons, and was thought to be unsinkable. For the Japanese, this maiden voyage was a mission of utmost secrecy. The Shinano was sailing from Yokosuka to Kure to be fully outfitted. It was accompanied by 3 destroyers, the Isokaze, Yukikaze, and Hamakaze, a formidable escort. The carrier's commander, Captain Abe Toshio, was a veteran of Pearl Harbor and the Battle of Midway. He knew the dangers posed by American submarines. As soon as the Archerfish was detected, Abe ordered a series of defensive maneuvers. He commanded the Shinano to start zigzagging, a standard tactic to throw off a submarine's aim. Imagine this from Captain Abe's perspective. He's in command of Japan's newest, most powerful warship, a symbol of the Empire's naval might. But it's not fully operational. Only half of its watertight doors are installed, and its crew is inexperienced. He knows American submarines are hunting in these waters. When his lookouts spot the Archerfish, Abe's training kicks in. He orders the zigzag course, trying to make his massive ship an unpredictable target. The destroyers also move to shield the carrier, creating a protective screen. The tension on the Shinano's bridge must have been immense. Every shadow on the water, every sonar ping could be a sign of impending doom. Back on the Archerfish, Commander Enright was facing his own set of challenges. The Shinano was fast, much faster than his submarine. He ordered the Archerfish to surface to gain speed and try to keep up. This was a huge risk. Surfacing made the submarine visible and vulnerable to the carrier's escorts. A desperate chase began. For hours, the Archerfish pushed its diesel engines to their absolute limit, trying to get ahead of the Shinano to set up an attack. But the carrier was just too quick. It seemed like the opportunity was slipping away. This is where the story takes a fascinating turn. The Japanese lookouts on the Shinano saw the Archerfish surfacing and giving chase. But Captain Abe made a critical miscalculation. He saw the submarine's relentless pursuit not as an act of desperation, but as a clever tactic. He believed the Archerfish was a decoy, trying to lure his fleet into a larger trap, a wolf pack of multiple submarines waiting in ambush. He had been warned about such tactics. So instead of turning his fleet to attack the lone submarine, he ordered the Shinano to maintain its course and speed, hoping to outrun the decoy and avoid the non-existent trap. This decision, born from a mix of caution and paranoia, would prove to be a fatal error. Abe was trying to be clever, but he was outsmarting himself. He was so focused on the threat he imagined that he completely underestimated the very real danger right in front of him. As the chase continued through the night, another unexpected event tipped the scales. The Shinano was a new ship, and its machinery wasn't fully broken in. One of its main propeller shaft bearings began to overheat. This was a serious mechanical failure. To prevent catastrophic damage, the engineering crew had to slow the ship down. The Shinano's speed dropped from a brisk 20 knots to a more manageable 18. This was the moment Commander Enright had been praying for. The massive carrier was no longer pulling away. The Archerfish now had a chance to catch up. It was a stroke of pure luck for the Americans, and a devastating blow for the Japanese. The unsinkable carrier's own mechanical flaws were turning against it. With the Shinano now slowed, Enright could finally focus on positioning his submarine for the perfect shot. This wasn't about just firing torpedoes wildly. Submarine warfare is a science of angles, speed, and timing. Enright needed to calculate the Shinano's exact course and speed to intercept it. He had to be patient. He maneuvered the Archerfish to get ahead of the carrier's path, a classic end-around maneuver. His goal was to find the ideal firing position, a point where the Shinano would pass directly in front of his torpedo tubes. This required incredible skill and nerves of steel. The escorting destroyers were still out there, actively hunting for him. One mistake, one moment of detection, and the Archerfish would be the one at the bottom of the ocean. As dawn approached, the moment of truth arrived. The Shinano, still on its zigzag course, made a fateful turn. It was heading directly towards the Archerfish. It was the perfect setup, a textbook firing solution. Enright couldn't believe his luck. He had been chasing this ghost for hours, and now it was sailing right into his lap. He ordered the Archerfish to dive to periscope depth. Peering through the eyepiece, he saw the colossal silhouette of the carrier filling his view. It was a submariner's dream target. The tension in the Archerfish's control room must have been unbearable. Every sailor knew this was it. At 3:17 a.m., Enright gave the order. Fire 1, fire 2. 6 torpedoes launched from the Archerfish, streaking through the dark water towards the Shinano. Enright had set the torpedoes to run shallow, hoping to cause maximum damage to the ship's hull just below the waterline. The crew of the Archerfish held their breath, counting the seconds. Then, a series of massive explosions rocked the ocean. 4 of the 6 torpedoes struck the Shinano's starboard side. On board the carrier, chaos erupted. The ship listed heavily as seawater flooded into the poorly sealed compartments. The inexperienced crew struggled to control the damage, but it was a losing battle. The unsinkable supercarrier was dying. Captain Abe and his crew fought for hours to save their ship, but the damage was too severe. The combination of the torpedo hits, the incomplete watertight systems, and the crew's inexperience sealed its fate. Just before 11 a.m., nearly 8 hours after the attack, the mighty Shinano capsized and sank beneath the waves, taking over 1,400 of its crew with it. The USS Archerfish, meanwhile, had dived deep and escaped the furious but ineffective counterattacks from the Japanese destroyers. The sinking of the Shinano was a stunning victory for the U.S. Navy and a devastating blow to Japan. It was a testament to the skill, patience, and incredible luck of Commander Enright and his crew. They had achieved the impossible, sinking the largest warship ever sunk by a submarine. It was a perfect storm of events: a determined commander, a critical misjudgment by the enemy, a lucky mechanical failure, and a perfectly executed attack. This incredible cat-and-mouse game in the dead of night remains one of the most dramatic and legendary tales in the history of naval warfare. 6 torpedoes, the sinking of an empire's hope. It all began with a single command: fire one. But it wasn't just one. It was a spread, a fan of death launched from the unseen enemy lurking beneath the surface. For the crew of the submarine, this was a calculated risk, a high-stakes gamble that could change the course of history. They aimed, they fired, and they held their breath, listening. The seconds ticked by, stretching into an eternity. Then, a faint sound, followed by another and another. The spread had found its mark. For the sailors on the mighty warship, the day started like any other. The sun was up, the sea was calm. Then the world exploded. Not once, but 4 times. Imagine the sound: a deep, gut-wrenching concussion that vibrates through your bones, followed by the horrifying screech of metal tearing apart underwater. One after another, the torpedoes slammed into the ship's hull. These weren't glancing blows. They were direct hits, each one a fatal wound. The first impact felt like an earthquake. The second and third followed in quick succession, ripping open the ship's vulnerable underbelly. The fourth was the final nail in the coffin, a catastrophic blow that sealed the vessel's fate. Water, cold and unforgiving, began to pour in, not as a leak, but as a flood. The sound of metal tearing was the sound of their world ending. On the deck, chaos erupted. This ship was a marvel of engineering, but its crew was a mix of seasoned veterans and, crucially, a large number of inexperienced sailors. When the alarms blared, panic became the enemy within. The ship was designed with a complex system of watertight compartments, a honeycomb of steel meant to contain flooding. But in the confusion, a critical mistake was made. Many of the watertight doors, which should have been sealed shut, were left open. Some were open for ventilation, others for ease of movement. As the ship listed violently, sailors scrambled, but the sudden angle of the deck made it impossible to close the heavy steel doors. Water surged from one compartment to the next, a cascade of destruction that engineering alone couldn't stop. The ship's own design, meant to save it, was now helping it sink faster. What followed was not a quick, merciful end. It was a slow, agonizing death that stretched on for 7 agonizing hours. This is a testament to the sheer toughness of the ship and the desperation of its crew. Damage control teams, brave men armed with little more than wrenches and wooden plugs, descended into the dark, flooding compartments. They fought a losing battle against the relentless pressure of the ocean. Imagine working in waist-deep, freezing water in near-total darkness, with the ship groaning and tilting around you. They tried to counter-flood other compartments to stabilize the list, a desperate measure to keep the ship upright. They tried to shore up bulkheads that were bulging under the immense strain. For 7 hours, they fought. They fought for their ship, for their comrades, and for their own lives. But for every gallon of water they pumped out, 1,000 more poured in. The list grew worse, the deck tilting until it was a steep, slippery slope. As the sun began to set, the fight was over. The great ship, once the pride of the fleet, was now a dying beast. The command was finally given: abandon ship. Men slid down the angled deck, jumping into the oil-slicked, debris-filled water. And then, with a final mournful groan, the ship's bow rose high into the air, its stern slipping beneath the waves. It hung there for a moment, a colossal monument against the twilight sky, before sliding backward into the abyss. It took with it over 1,400 souls, men who had signed up to serve their country, lost to the cold, dark depths. But the ship didn't just take lives. It took a secret. Legend says that it was carrying a precious, irreplaceable cargo. Some say it was a massive shipment of gold, meant to fund the war effort. Others whisper of secret documents, plans that could have turned the tide of the conflict. Or perhaps it was something far more mysterious, an artifact of immense cultural value. The truth of this secret legend sank with the ship, and to this day, it remains one of history's most tantalizing maritime mysteries, guarded by the deep ocean and the souls of the 1,400 men who went down with their vessel. The sinking wasn't just a military loss. It was the loss of an icon, a tragedy that crippled a nation's morale and left a ghost story that continues to fascinate us to this day. The verdict of history, the greatest submarine kill. Late one night, a lookout on the Archerfish spots a blip on the radar. A big blip. In fact, it's the largest radar contact they've ever seen. Peering through the periscope, Commander Enright sees a silhouette unlike anything he's ever encountered. It's massive, a behemoth cutting through the dark waves, escorted by several destroyers. He knows it's a carrier, but its sheer size is baffling. Enright radios in his contact to headquarters. He describes this colossal ship, a carrier so large it dwarfs everything in the Japanese fleet. The response he gets back from intelligence is stunningly dismissive. They basically tell him he's seeing things. There is no such carrier in the Japanese inventory, they reply. They thought he'd mistaken a group of smaller ships, or maybe his radar was malfunctioning. But Enright knew what he saw. He was looking at a sea monster, and he wasn't going to let it get away. So who's this mystery ship? It was the Shinano, the third and final Yamato-class battleship. After the disastrous Battle of Midway, where Japan lost 4 of its best carriers, the Imperial Japanese Navy made a crucial decision. They converted the partially built Shinano from a battleship into a heavily armored aircraft carrier. This thing was an absolute giant, displacing over 70,000 tons when fully loaded. It was the largest warship built in the world at that time. It was designed to be a support carrier, a floating supply base and repair depot for other carriers, packed with so much armor it was considered practically unsinkable. But here's the kicker. The Shinano was on its maiden voyage. It was sailing from Yokosuka to Kuru to be fitted out with its remaining equipment and aircraft. The ship wasn't even fully operational. Many of its watertight doors hadn't been installed. Its crew was inexperienced, and its damage control teams were not yet properly trained. They were rushing, trying to get the carrier to a safer port away from American bombers. This haste would prove to be their fatal mistake. Back on the Archerfish, Commander Enright is in a desperate chase. The Shinano is faster than his submarine. He can't keep up in a straight race. For hours, it looks like his prize is slipping away. But then, fate intervenes. The Shinano, worried about a potential American submarine trap ahead, makes a series of zigzag maneuvers. In one of these turns, it steers directly into the path of the Archerfish. It was the perfect shot, a textbook setup that a submarine commander could only dream of. At 3:17 a.m. on November 29, 1944, Enright gives the order to fire. The Archerfish unleashes a spread of 6 torpedoes. He sets them to run shallow, hoping to damage the ship's upper hull. 4 of those torpedoes find their mark. 4 hits on a ship this size should have been manageable, a nuisance at best. The Japanese officers on the Shinano weren't overly concerned. After all, this was the unsinkable carrier, but they had gravely underestimated the damage. And this is where we get into the lessons of naval architecture. The torpedoes hit the Shinano right where its anti-torpedo bulge met the main armor belt. This junction was a known design flaw. The impact buckled the joints and sent shockwaves through the hull, causing flooding far beyond the initial impact zones. Compounding the problem, remember all those missing watertight doors and the green crew? Chaos ensued. Water began pouring into the ship from multiple breaches. The pumps couldn't keep up. The inexperienced crew struggled to implement effective damage control measures. The ship began to list, and the list grew worse and worse. Meanwhile, Commander Enright and his crew on the Archerfish could only listen. They had dived deep to escape the escorting destroyers, which were dropping depth charges. They heard the explosions of their torpedoes, followed by the terrifying sounds of a giant ship breaking apart. They had no idea if they had actually sunk it. When they finally surfaced, the behemoth was gone. The sea was empty. It wasn't until after the war that the true story was confirmed. When American intelligence interrogated surviving Japanese officers, they were stunned. Commander Enright was summoned. He was asked to sketch the ship he had seen that night from memory. He drew the massive, flat-topped carrier with its distinctive island superstructure offset to the starboard side. His drawing was a near-perfect match for the top-secret blueprints of the Shinano. The unbelievable story was true. The sinking of the Shinano remains a record holder. To this day, it is the largest warship ever to be sunk by a submarine. It is a testament to the deadly efficiency of submarine warfare and a stark reminder that no ship is truly unsinkable. The story of the Archerfish and the Shinano is about more than just a single naval engagement. It's a lesson in humility, a critique of hubris, and a story of how a combination of skill, determination, and a healthy dose of luck can change the course of history. For his incredible achievement, Commander Joseph Enright was awarded the Navy Cross. The USS Archerfish and its crew went down in history, their legacy forever cemented in the annals of submarine warfare. Their story serves as an inspiration, proving that even when the odds are stacked against you, and even when people doubt you, trusting your instincts and seizing the moment can lead to the most extraordinary results. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the biggest giants can be brought down by a single, well-aimed shot from the deep. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into naval history. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible tales from the past. Let me know in the comments what you think is the most amazing part of this story. See you next time.